Alrighty then, YouTube viewers, it's finally time. I finally do my very first video game review on this channel. Now, previously on the channel that most of you have probably known, I've been mainly doing some gameplay videos. Mainly been doing my Let's Play currently on Sonic Mania, but I think it's finally time I get into the game reviews, which is the real meat of my channel. Now, to kick off the entire game review series, it's time we talk about one of my favorite video game series of all time, and a video game series because Halloween is around the corner. I'm going to spend the time talking about a video game series that I really enjoy. It's time we finally talk about the Five Nights at Freddy's series, and throughout September and October, I'll be dedicating the weekends to reviewing. I'll be dedicating my time to reviewing all five Nights at Freddy's games. So, without further say, let's do this. This is the Five Nights at Freddy's. This is the month of Five Nights at Freddy's. Alright, so to kick off the month, everybody, and to kick off this entire new series, it's time we talk about the one that started it all. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 for PC and Steam, as well as its iOS and Android version. Now, alright, so around the year of like 2014, there was an unknown indie game developer known as Scott Cawthon, and Scott Cawthon made a game called I don't know how to exactly say this, I apologize for me stuttering a tiny bit, but he made a game called Chipper and Lumber Company, or something like that. But either way, it was like a lumberjacking game. It was like a lumber mill game, a simulator game with bears, and I don't exactly know what it was, but have you ever heard of it? Neither have I, but from the YouTube footage I have gotten for this review, it's not worth checking out. So, the reason why that game exactly sucked was because, Scott really, it wasn't really good. I mean, it was pretty low budget, it was very not well complete, and probably the worst aspect, and what many critics have said and given negative reviews on the game, was because of those freaky-ass bears that look like Chuck E. Cheese animatronics, like demented Chuck E. Cheese animatronics. So, because of that, because of the failure that Scott had encountered, he decided to take what didn't work in his previous game and make it something that did work. And he eventually got to work, and he eventually took that demented Chuck E. Cheese idea and made it into the game that we all know today, Five Nights at Freddy's. So Five Nights at Freddy's began all the way back in August of 2014. In fact, it was published in August of 2014, and it had shocked many players, and many people in particular, because the game was eventually very well received and was played by many popular YouTubers, and was often criticized to being one of the best horror games of all time. Better than Amnesia, better than Outlast, better than all those games. It was that good. And for a low-budget game, that is a huge accomplishment. And for me, I was in middle school when Five Nights at Freddy's first rolled around, and I have been a FNAF fan ever since middle school. So, I saw the game came out. I heard a lot of people talking about the game, especially when I made it to 6th grade. But I could never play the game for myself because I didn't own a PC or a Steam. Well, I owned a PC, a Windows 7, but my Steam did not work on it. It always crashed down and it failed a lot. So, I had no way of playing the original PC version, and I had no way of, I could have gotten it on iOS and Android, but I was not in for it. I thought it was very dumb in my opinion. I didn't really know what it was about. I never saw footage of it. I never gotten around to playing it. I was like, what is this exactly? I mean, I didn't hear much about it, but it got really, really overhyped, and especially when the 4th game came out, which I will talk more about the 4th game once I get to the 4th review, but when the 4th game rolled around, everyone was talking about it. It was that great. And I was like, what's the hype? I'm gonna go find out. And I downloaded the demo for Five Nights at Freddy's 4. I played it, and I'm like, holy smokes, this game is horrifying, it was frustrating, and it was just nearly traumatizing for me. I mean, it wasn't really horrifying, nothing too scary, but my god, I was not expecting a game like that. I thought it was going to be something worse, I don't even know. But no matter what, I remember my experiences with Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and I'll talk more about my experiences with the fourth game when we get to the fourth game. But as of now, ever since I played the fourth game, I love the series to death. So, eventually, after my experiences with the fourth game and when I became a huge FNAF fan, I eventually got all the games on the iOS and Android. I got all the games on it, and eventually when I got my own PC, my Windows 10, I got all the games for Steam. And now that I have all the games, on both versions in particular, and because I have played these games for like a couple of years, and because I own some merchandise, I think it's fair enough for me to give a full-on review of what my thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 2, 3, 4, and Sister Location were all about. So, with that being said, let's dive in, shall we? This is my review on the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. Alright, so, of course I already talked about the development and history of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Now, when the first game rolled around, people, of course, were shocked about the game. They were, like, wondering what it was all about. And I was wondering what it was all about. So, now let's go ahead and talk about the game. Starting off with the plot. So, let's begin with that. The plot of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is pretty straightforward. In fact, it is probably the most straightforward plot of all the games. So, pretty much, there is a restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, and they're looking for a new security guard who works the night shift. And that person that needs the company that needs the new security guard is you, and you are taking the place as Mike Schmidt, and you are the new security guard that works at Freddy Fazbear's at night. Now, because you work at night, you do get a voicemailer / tutorial guide, which is the phone guy, and he pretty much calls you every night. He tells you everything that you need to know about each night, and he gives you some, like, history about the buildings, and, like, what to do, how to survive, and everything. And, honestly, I think that was very handy. I really loved how the phone guy interacted, but he was quite disturbing. But in all technicalities, the phone guy tells Mike that at night, the animatronics come to life, and they are, like, they were really child-friendly. Like, in the day, they're child-friendly, happy-go-lucky animatronics. And these animatronics are Freddy Fazbear and the Sunshine Crew. Freddy Fazbear, the singing bear, Bonnie the rabbit, the guy with the electric guitar, Chica the chicken with her really scary cupcake called Mr. Cupcake, which I had a fear was like a separate character and I thought it was going to kill me. And then, of course, there's the unknown character known as Foxy the Pirate, who has been put out of order due to a couple issues. But, excuse me, but either way, because all of these animatronics, like, during the day, they're all happy, and they really entertain the kids, but at night, they become mass murderers, and they are after you. And the reason why they are after you is because, I think it was because of faulty wiring, or because if they stand for too long, their servos will lock up, so they usually roam around at night. And if they find a person after hours, they won't recognize it as a person. They'll probably recognize a person as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. And because of that, if they find Mike, they will stuff him into a Freddy Fazbear suit, which has a tons of like wires and sharp edges and everything that can literally squish Mike to death, kill him, and eventually he'll become just nothing but a dead corpse inside a broken and unused Freddy Fazbear. And that's actually kind of scary if you ask me. And pretty much what Mike's objective is that he has to last till 6 a.m. watching all the animatronics on the cameras and making sure they don't come after him. And to Mike's advantage, he has not only the security cameras, but he also has 2 blast doors that he can close on all the animatronics. And because of that, that's actually pretty handy, and that he can actually survive and stand a chance against them. Now, there is some more plot revealed into the story of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, but I won't dive too much into it because I know the plot of FNAF is absolutely ginormous. There is so much plot in the game, it's insane. But basically, the plot that, another very important plot point in this game was that originally Freddy Fazbear's was going to close down. It was a closing down restaurant, and the reason why it was closed down was because of two events in particular. One was the bite of '87, which had to do with some kid that got bitten by some animatronic and they lost their frontal lobe. And because of that, they pretty much are living without their frontal lobe. I don't know how that works, but whatever the case was, they shut down the restaurant. And eventually later on, there was also another mysterious person that led 5 kids into the back room and brutally murdered them. And they probably stuffed them into these costumes, and people could never find the kids' bodies anymore. Because of that, they were just dead. Because of that, Freddy Fazbear's was closing, and it had faced a lot of issues in the past. And I guess they should have just stopped the entire facility, because after a kid losing their frontal lobe and 5 kids being murdered, you'd think they would close and finish it all, right? Well, they don't. They don't. They still continue everything, and I'm like, my god, that's gotta be the worst company in the world. Now, I think I delved into the plot enough. I'll talk more about other things, but let's dive into the game itself. Alright, so the gameplay of this game is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's extremely straightforward, simple to accomplish, and you can pretty much master it right off the bat. So, pretty much your controls, you don't really have any controls, really. All you do is you use your mouse to point and click at certain objects. You can turn on the lights on both the left and right door. If you turn on the light, you can see a tiny bit of the hallway. And you can also close the 2 blast doors, and you can also flip up your security camera, your monitor, to look at the security cameras and view where all the animatronics are. Now, each of these animatronics have their own different set patterns. But before I get into that, I want to talk about, like, the aesthetics of the game is. So, like, graphic-wise, well, the game was made kind of low budget. It was made like a 2D game. Graphics-wise, the game doesn't look that bad. In fact, I really love the attention to detail, and it really looks cool. And even then, even as you look through the security cameras, you can see all sorts of different Easter eggs that weren't there before. Some rare Easter eggs, like in the back room, the heads and everything turn and look at you. Bonnie can get super close to the camera. And in the hallway, like, there's, like, there are, like, these kids, like, the posters of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, they're replaced with 3 kids that are saying, like, help me, or something like that. And there's also, like, in the right corner, there's a sign that's, like, the rules of recognition, but on the sign, it can also be replaced with a newspaper clipping saying, like, 5 children brutally murdered by unknown person. And one of the most iconic Easter eggs is probably the Golden Freddy Easter egg. Now, if you look in the west hallway corner where Bonnie is, the Freddy poster, it can constantly change. Like, I mean, it starts off with just, you know, Freddy saying celebrate, then it can change to, like, Freddy's head chopping off, and eventually it will change to a poster of a yellow Freddy known as Golden Freddy. And you'll hear, like, a little child laugh, and eventually Golden Freddy will be in your room. And I'll talk more about Golden Freddy a bit later, but I mean, graphics-wise, the game doesn't look that bad, and I like how much attention to detail there was put in this game. The iOS and Android version, not so much. I mean, pretty much the game, it looks the same on the iOS and Android. It just, it really doesn't do a justice compared to the first game, because, like, it doesn't really do much of a justice compared to the PC or Steam version. I mean, it looks fine. Like, for an iOS and Android, it looks okay, but there are problems. Like, the frame rate can be a bit choppy. You won't see any of those, like, rare scenes, screens, Easter eggs, or whatever. And worst of all, the jump scares are just horrible, in my opinion. Especially, like, on the PC and Steam, they really get you. Like, I mean, they really feel like they are scaring you. But maybe after you play it for maybe, like, a half hour or so, you'll get worn down from the jump scares. And that's how I felt when I was playing the game. But on the iOS and Android, I've never gotten scared of the jump scares, but because their frame rate is just choppy, and it really feels bad, and I don't really like it. So, yeah, after that, there's also the music and the ambiance, and I like the music and ambiance. I think all the songs are very scary, they really set up the mood for horror, and I like that a lot. I really, really find enjoyment into the aesthetics, and for the gameplay, it's pretty straightforward as well. I talked enough about the gameplay, but I might as well talk about each of the animatronics' movements. Now, each of the animatronics have their own separate movements. Each of the four have their own movements, and they have their own attack patterns. On the first few nights, it's really Bonnie and Chica will come after you the most. And then Foxy will become active on, like, night 2 and progressing. And then Freddy becomes active on, like, night 3, 4, and 5, and so on and so forth. But, either way, when it comes to animatronics movements, they're straightforward, but they're hard to follow. We'll start with Bonnie, because he was the first one to move. Bonnie's movement is, it's a bit weird. I mean, he can take a long time to walk across the facility, and he'll get to your room. And the basic way you can catch him is if you catch him on the left hallway light. If you find him on the hallway light, you can close the blast door and you can just wait for him to leave. Now, you can see his shadow if you hit the light button, and I think that's a very nice attention to detail. If you don't see a shadow, you can open the door. And same applies for Chica, except that she goes from the right. And that's pretty much Bonnie and Chica's movements. They can take a while, but sometimes they'll instantly make it towards you, especially when the later nights progress. Now, Foxy is a bit of a different character. Foxy appears at the Pirate's Cove camera. And basically what you gotta do is that you have to look at the camera on Pirate's Cove. You have to watch that camera, and you have to make sure Foxy doesn't leave. He has a couple phases. His first phase is like his curtain's closed, and then he'll show his face. Then he'll eventually like get out of his curtain and eventually start to run, and then he'll be gone. And once he's gone, then he's coming at you. And you have to close the left door, look at the west hallway, and then let him slam the door. But however, close the door first before you look at the camera, because if you look at the camera and you find him running, you're not gonna have enough time to catch him, and you're gonna die. But it's like, it's not really unfair. Like, if you have quick reflexes, you can do so, but it's just that I recommend closing the door first and then looking at him, and quickly get back to Pirate's Cove after you briefly look at him. Because the thing is that Foxy is a bit unfair, but I'll get into that a bit later. Now, Freddy is the real son of a gun out of the bunch, because Freddy's movements are they're so wonky. He appears on the right, like he goes around on the right side, but however, his gimmick is much like Foxy, except that he's more fair. Now, he can move from the stage to the dining room, to the bathroom, to the kitchen, to the west hall, and then the east hall, and then the east hall corner. Now, because he can do that, you gotta make sure you watch him on the cameras, because if he's at your east hall door, then you can't catch him on the light at all. It's any chance that he can just show up in your room and instantly kill you, and I find that a bit unfair for me. So, I recommend just watching him as closely as possible. Now, and now there's also Golden Freddy that's worth talking about. Like, Golden Freddy, I talked briefly about him, like, you can find a Golden Freddy poster, And if you find that poster, you'll find Golden Freddy in your room. And because Golden Freddy's in your room, you have to quickly flip up the monitor. If you don't do that, if you wait too long, he will crash your game and shut down your progress. He'll shut down your game and you have to turn it back on. Now, in the iOS and Android version, Golden Freddy's not a thing, so you don't have to worry about him. And you'll constantly see throughout the night, it's me hallucinations. It's very weird. They can pop up anytime they want, and they can just kind of scare you, kind of like make you nervous. And that's really, really insane. But in the iOS and Android version, there's no such thing, and that's what I kind of don't really like. But now it's time to actually talk about the difficulty of this game. Now, the difficulty of this game, the real hard part of Five Nights at Freddy's, is one thing in particular. You see the little power meter in the left corner? Well, the power meter is pretty much your life meter. You'll see a little bar that says usage as well, but basically what the power meter is that you have 100% of power, and that's it. You have 100% of power to last for 6 hours. Now, the thing that you have to worry about is your power, because the more things you use, like the more doors you use, the more cameras you use, anything like that, it can take up, the more usage you use, the more power is drained. And because of the power, it becomes a real tedious task. So if you think, oh, I could just close the left and right door and I'll be perfectly fine, you can't. You'll only last maybe until 4 a.m., but then it's game over. You have to legit conserve power. Now, because of that, each of the animatronics have a certain movement set that is extremely unfair and can be extremely just luck-based. Like, Bonnie and Chica, like, they can usually, their movement patterns are pretty random. They can appear at your door, they can't, and it's like, you gotta make sure that when they're there, you quickly close the door, but you gotta make sure they leave as soon as possible. And they can leave for maybe, they can leave like for like 2 seconds, and then they're gone. But sometimes they can stand there for like 2 minutes, and then they can drain enough power, resulting in you losing no matter what. And because of that, that's when the unfair factor comes into play. The only way you are going to win this game is luck. And even with Foxy, you gotta watch him a lot. And the more times he smashes your door, the more power he takes away. And the more power he takes away, the quicker your power will go out. And once your power goes out, you cannot do anything else. You just sit there in the dark, ready to die. And eventually Freddy will appear. He'll do like he'll do his theme, which is the Tornado March. It's like, like that stuff. And because of that, you have no choice and nothing to do. The way, like, it's supposed to say that, like, if you stand completely still and, like, not do anything, then Freddy will not instantly kill you. But for me, I don't see the case. Because he can take as long as, Freddy can take as long as he wants, and he can, and then the power will go completely black. And then he can either jump scare you or let you win. Now, his longest windup is about 50 seconds, but he can do a short theme, and then he can instantly jump scare you. And because of that, then the game becomes really frustrating, because you have to make sure you have enough power in each hour of the night. In the first hour, you gotta make sure you have about 85%. In the second hour, you have to make sure that you have about somewhere in like 70 or like 65, that area. And then in the third hour, you gotta make sure you have half of that power left. You have to make sure you have 50%. Then in the fourth hour, you gotta make sure you have like 30. You gotta make sure you have like 20, like maybe 25 to 20%. And in the last hour, you gotta make sure you have about 10% left to make it through the night. And you can win if you don't do anything. If like the power goes completely dark, you can win. It's just that you have to make sure your fingers are crossed. And I have done that, but I can never pull it off. I mean, it just becomes tedious, and I don't like that. I don't like the luck factor, and like a horror game that becomes scary at first and seems fun, if it goes into the luck factor, then it just becomes it just becomes frustrating. And because you're doing the same cycle over and over and over again, and you can just die over and over and over again for no apparent reason. It just comes down to luck, and I hate luck. I hate random chance in video games. That is probably the number one thing I hate in video games. It's luck, and I hate luck. Ugh. I'm sorry. But there's nothing else I could say about the difficulty. Really, it's not really that unfair. But you gotta make sure you survive for 6 in-game hours. The thing is that you have a total, like, 6 in-game hours is probably like 8 minutes. In the iOS and Android version, it's 6 minutes. So it's not really that bad, but it feels like an eternity when you're trying so desperately to make sure you conserve enough power. And it's not much on the luck. The real challenge of Five Nights at Freddy's is more or less on the player and what the player chooses to do. And that's what I like about the difficulty. But even if the player is flawless, you just barely have enough power to make it through the night. And that's what I hate about the first FNAF game. Now, I'll be going into all, like, the collectibles and all the other stuff. So I'll see you. So, like, I'll talk about all the collectibles and everything next. Alright, now, aside from the flawed difficulty of this game, we also do have to talk about what else is left in Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, let's say if you do make it through all 5 nights. Well, you get your paycheck. You're pretty accomplished. You won the game. You're done. Well, guess what? There's a 6th night. And the 6th night's no different compared to the 5th night, except that it's harder. And that's when the luck-based gets more played. But I think I've ranted enough about the luck-based. So, really, if you beat the 6th night, all you do is get an overtime paycheck and a 2nd star. And you'll eventually unlock Custom Night, which is your sandbox mode. In Custom Night, you can choose any difficulty you want, and that's actually really cool. You can choose any difficulty you want. Now, the thing about Custom Night is that there is one challenge in particular that I know a lot of people want me to do. It is the 20-20-20-20 challenge, the 420 challenge, and that is the impossible mode of the game. That is when you have to try and beat, like, that's when you have to be flawless. And that's when the luck/skill base comes into play. For me, I'm not going to do 420 mode. I find it completely worthless, very difficult. And if you win 420 mode, guess what you get? Nothing. You just get a 3rd star for bragging rights. So, is 420 mode worth your time? No. 6th night? Yeah, if you want to unlock that sandbox mode, go right ahead. And in the sandbox mode, you can find even more Easter eggs. Like, if you type 1987 in the sandbox mode, you'll get a secret Golden Freddy jump scare. And that could crash your game, obviously, but that's the only way to summon Golden Freddy in the iOS and Android version, because Golden Freddy's not in the iOS and Android version at all. Now, when it comes to the iOS and Android version, I'm going to talk about that version. Now, the iOS and Android version, or I should say iOS and Android, I'm sorry, I pronounce it iOS, because whenever I see iOS, I always pronounce it iOS. That's just how I pronounce it. I apologize if you are... I apologize. I'm probably going to get many complaints in the comments saying that. I apologize. Oh, God, I'm having a coughing fit. I apologize. So either way, about the iOS and Android version. So, the iOS and Android version, it's okay. It's an okay port of Five Nights at Freddy's. In fact, it does it justice, but it doesn't really do as much as the PC or Steam version. I mean, the frame rate and graphics can be a bit wonky, and especially, like, you know, the buttons and, like, the button pressing and the monitor, well, like, how everything interacts, like, you know, the sensitivity, I should say, can be a bit weird at some points. But I find the iOS and Android version an okay remake of the first game. In fact, for you Android people, if you have an Android version of Five Nights at Freddy's, you actually get the shop, and in the shop you can buy a Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica plushie, and even unlimited power. But however, they are worth extra money, and honestly, that kind of disappoints me because if they have a shop specifically for the Android version, I wish there would have been, like, you know, a playing mechanic, like a point system, where if you earn enough points, you could buy all that sort of stuff, and that's what I've liked. That's what I have liked, excuse me. So, I would have liked that, but for you iOS people like me, sorry, we don't get that. But overall, it's not really that bad. I like the iOS and Android version of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. I mean, it's certainly not a must-buy. Like, I find the PC and Steam version the more superior version. And in fact, there are cheat codes that you can use in the PC version. But honestly, I don't want to dive too much into that. So, that is my quick review. This is going to be my style of reviews, of video game reviews, of any video game. I'm just going to be briefly talking about them, what I think about the game, and yeah, so without further say, I think Five Nights at Freddy's was a great introduction to the series. I think it was a great game. I really applaud Scott Cawthon for doing such a thing. He made a game that didn't work. He took something that didn't work from a previous game and made it to something that did work, and that's what I love. So this was Scott's shining achievement, and I really applaud him for doing so. Five Nights at Freddy's is a great game. I will give it probably an 8 I'll probably give it an 8 out of 10. I find the first game not really bad. When it comes to sequels, it's going to get better and worse as we progress. But this wasn't that bad. I really love Five Nights at Freddy's. If you own a PC or Steam, go ahead and check out Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't really recommend you do it, but it's a horror classic. Like, I mean, it's in the archives of good horror games. Now, when it comes to the iOS and Android version, it's not a must-buy, but if you don't own a PC or Steam like I did in the past, then you have to play that version. I mean, it's okay. But if you're not into Five Nights at Freddy's, don't check the game out. I really don't. I'm not forcing you to check it out. I'm only recommending it. So, without further say, this has been the first video of the Five Nights at Freddy's month of Five Nights at Freddy's. The next video we're going to be taking a look at will be the Five Nights at Freddy's 2, its sequel. And I apologize for my coughing fits. I don't know, I'm recently starting to get a bit sick. I apologize if I've been coughing too much in this video. And I'm sorry if I ranted too much that you couldn't keep track. But it's okay. But either way, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next review. Goodbye.